I'm Leslie Wade. I'm the conference chair for NAFEX, and I'm joined here by Chris Heater, our president, Nick Casco, our one of our directors, and our speakers for today. All right, hang on a second. All right, I think we're ready to go. Nick?
Welcome to North American Fruit Explorers 2022 virtual conference, Good Fruit from the Ground Up. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nick Casco. I'm a volunteer board director at NAFEX, as we like to call the organization for short. I'll be your facilitator for today's session, Backyard Orchards for Homestead and Community. You can find me on YouTube at Nick Casco. I'm a backyard orchardist myself, so I'm super excited for this session today. And on my channel, you can see where I teach you how to graft, how to plant trees, and a lot of the varieties that I grow. Before I introduce today's panel, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items and a little about NAFEX as we allow a few more people to join in. First, this is a webinar, so unlike in Zoom meetings, participants' audio and video features are automatically disabled. Second, we encourage you to ask questions. Please use the Q&A in Zoom to ask topical questions or technical support questions for our co-host. Third, if you are newer to Zoom, you can adjust your screen view and some Zoom settings on your device. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to members and conference participants after the conference at nafex.org. Just a few words about NAFEX. We were founded in 1967. The North American Fruit Explorers is a network of individuals throughout the United States and Canada devoted to the discovery, cultivation, and distribution of superior varieties of fruits and nuts. Although the ranks of our membership includes professional pomologists, nursery owners, and commercial orchardists, NAFEX members are all amateurs in the truest sense of the word, and they are motivated by their love of fine fruit. NAFEX members also share information, experiences, and fruit propagating material via our website, social media channels, fruit-specific interest group meetings, and annual conferences like this one, whether in person, online, or both. As a paid NAFEX member, you can get 4 editions of the Pomona Journal each year, as well as the ability to search 50 years of Pomonas in our digital library, which contain a wealth of fruit growing information. This organization exists because of fruit growing members like you, and we encourage you to continue your membership and become actively involved in an interest group as an interest group member, committee member, or board member. Please visit our website to learn more at nafex.org. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speakers. Today we're joined by Zen Kai from Tiny Urban Farm and Tonia Lordy of Home Orchard Education Center. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Zen Kai. Zen Kai is a food growing enthusiast located in Atlanta, Georgia. His food growing journey started in 2010 with a small garden in the side yard of his 0.2 acre urban lot. By 2011, his vegetable garden has taken over the majority of his backyard. Without room left to grow fruits, he purchased a half-acre abandoned city lot in 2012 with the dream of turning it into an orchard. It took more than 6 years of trial and error before he began to see appreciable progress. The increasing success of his orchard inspired him in 2020 to tackle building another orchard as part of his most recent project to convert a 2-acre property into a tiny hobby farm. When he's not working in his orchard, tending to his vegetable garden, or hanging out with his chickens and rabbits, he writes about his adventures in small-scale farming. He shares his writings on social media to inspire others to discover the joys and rewards of growing one's own fruit. You can follow him at My Tiny Urban Farm on Instagram and Facebook. Zen, take it away. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Nick. All right, so my slide should be up on the screen now. Hello, everyone. My name is Zen Kai. 10 years ago, I dreamed of growing fruits in my backyard. I've always been very health conscious, and I wanted to grow my own fruits so I can enjoy fresh, naturally grown fruits that were free of pesticides and herbicides. I had no idea at the time that growing fruits in the humid Southeast would be very challenging, and that doing so without chemicals would be even more so. I started my fruit growing adventure with a purchase of an abandoned city lot not far from my home in Atlanta, Georgia. The lot was half an acre and located in USDA cold hardiness zone 8A. My plan was to convert this vacant lot into a large orchard. I called this project my tiny urban orchard. After the first 6 years of trying to grow my own fruits, I had many more failures than successes. I had invested a significant amount of time and resources and had nowhere near the amount of fruit production I had envisioned. This forced me to reevaluate the situation and make some changes. The changes I made improved the diversity and production of fruits I grew at my tiny urban orchard. Most importantly, it made growing my own fruits less challenging and much more enjoyable. Today, my tiny urban orchard has 106 fruit trees made up of 89 varieties of 18 fruit types. Each year, I'm tasting new fruits that are fruiting for the first time. I look forward to this orchard really coming to life over the next few years as the trees mature. With the knowledge and experience that I gained at my tiny urban orchard, I wondered how much better I would do if I had to build another orchard from scratch. 2 years ago, the opportunity to do exactly that came up. In 2020, I began a new project 1 hour north of Atlanta on a 2-acre property located in Zone 7B. In less than 1 year, I planted 145 fruit trees made up of 136 varieties of 18 fruit types. While the orchard is less than 2 years old, I've already tasted fruit from 1 variety of Asian pear, 6 varieties of Asian persimmon, 4 varieties of jute, 2 varieties of figs, 1 variety of mulberry, and 1 variety of mandarin orange. I'm super excited to taste the 100 plus varieties that still remain in the. What I would like to do today is to talk about how I now approach the process of building a backyard orchard. I will draw from my experience building my orchard and share some of the lessons I've learned and the tools I have found useful along the way. An important thing to remember when one is thinking about growing fruits is that fruit production is very resource intensive and places a lot of demands on fruit trees. Therefore, it is very important for fruit trees to be in optimal health. To ensure optimal health, we need to provide fruit trees with what they need to thrive. In general, fruit trees require the following: sun, water, healthy soil, and space. So before planting an orchard, it is good to figure out how much of each of these resources you will need and how much you have available. Fruit trees require full sun exposure for optimal fruit production. A minimum of 6 to 8 hours is recommended. When trying to determine how much sun exposure a location gets, be sure to remember that the path of travel for the sun changes throughout the year. So a spot that's shaded during the winter season can actually be in full sun during the summer months. There are several smartphone apps available that allow you to determine the sun exposure of a location at any time of the year. The one I use is called Sunseeker. Here's a picture showing me using this app yesterday to determine the sun exposure at the southern edge of my orchard, which is bordered by a row of very tall pine trees. The yellow line shows the path of the sun's travel yesterday and indicates that currently this spot gets just 5 hours of sun exposure, from 7 a.m. in the morning to noon. From noon until sunset, the sun is blocked by the pine trees. If I tilt my phone's camera towards the sky, I then see a red line indicating the sun's path on June 21st, the first day of summer. On that day, the sun exposure starts at 6:30 a.m. and ends at 5:30 p.m. when the sun travels behind the pine trees. So this exact same spot gets 11 hours of sun during the summer when fruit production is at its peak. In general, fruit trees require about 1 inch of rain every 7 to 10 days. How much supplemental watering you need to do is dependent on how much rainfall your location gets. You can obtain historical rainfall data from the website of the National Weather Service at www.weather.gov. For example, if I look at my location, the website informs me that in the past 10 years, Atlanta has had an average annual rainfall of 54 inches. Based on this information, I should not have to do much supplemental watering once my fruit trees become established. While different trees have different soil preferences, in general, trees do well in soil that is enriched by organic matter. The way I'm doing this is by routinely adding wood chips over my orchards. The wood chips improve soil health by serving as a mulch layer. Over time, as the wood chips break down, organic matter is added and improves the soil. Tree companies usually jump at the opportunity of giving away their wood chips rather than having to pay to transport and dump them at the landfill. An easy way to request wood chips from tree companies is through the website getchipdrop.com. There is no cost to obtain the wood chip, and best of all, it's better for the environment. If you have a hard time obtaining wood chips, or you find them too much work to move and spread, another option is to use leaves as a source of organic matter. During the fall, I collect many bags of leaves that my neighbors leave on the street for the city to pick up and dispose of. I find the leaves to be much less work to spread than wood chips, and they also seem to do a much better job of weed suppression. One reason that I purchased a half-acre lot to start my first orchard was because I was under the impression that fruit trees require lots of space. I got this impression by looking at commercial orchards where trees are spaced very far apart. Later on, I learned that usually this spacing is not to accommodate a tree's growth, but rather to provide room for the large equipment that's needed for maintaining and harvesting the orchard. In a backyard orchard, the spacing between trees can often be greatly reduced. By selecting trees on dwarf or semi-dwarf rootstocks, and with routine pruning, trees can be planted much closer together. Case in point, here is a tag that came with the first fruit tree I planted. This tree is a Shinko Asian pear. Notice that the tag calls for a spacing of 30 to 40 feet. While I follow this recommendation, now that the tree is 10 years old, I can see that even half that distance would have been overly generous. Asian pear trees have a very upright profile and can do perfectly fine spaced 15 feet or even 10 feet apart. An easy way to figure out how many trees you have room for is to use one of the many online tree spacing calculators. For example, using this calculator, I can figure out how many trees I can fit in an average size 50 feet by 50 feet backyard. If I use 30-foot spacing, I would only be able to grow one tree. However, if I change the spacing to 10 feet, I'll be able to grow 25 trees in the same space. Once you have ensured that you can meet the basic requirements for growing fruit trees at your location, it's time to select which fruits to plant. The general recommendation I came across when I was starting out is to start with a list of fruits that you enjoy eating, and then determine which of those fruit trees can grow in your area. This is determined by the tree's USDA cold hardiness rating. For example, here's a tag for my first brown turkey fig tree, which shows that this variety of fig can be grown in USDA cold hardiness zone 7 through 9. I followed this general recommendation when I started my tiny urban orchard, and unfortunately, while all the fruit trees did grow successfully in my region, they did not meet my primary objective of producing an abundance of homegrown fruits without the use of chemicals. Most of the fruits had pest and disease issues, which were caused by the hot and humid climate we have here. So after 6 years of effort, of the 54 trees that were in my orchard, there were only 4 trees that I felt were worth growing. Based on that experience, I now believe that the best way to choose fruit trees is to first research and learn what fruits will grow well in your region. Talk to people who have been growing fruit successfully in your region and are growing with the same goals as you. For example, I reached out to nursery owners and commercial orchard owners to find out what has done well for them. I also specifically asked what did well without the spraying of chemicals. Through these conversations, I discovered many delicious and easy to grow fruits that I didn't even know existed. Here's a look at the difference between the fruit types I selected 10 years ago for my tiny urban orchard and the ones I selected when I built a new orchard 2 years ago at Tiny Country Farm. You'll notice that many of the additions at the new orchard have the word native next to them. One of the keys to finding fruit trees that will do well in your location is to grow ones that are native to your region. These have the benefit of having already undergone long periods of natural selection. As a result, they have much fewer pests and disease issues, which means less work and more fruits. A good example of this is a mulberry tree that randomly popped up in my tiny urban orchard shortly after I cleared the lot in 2012. It most likely grew from seeds dropped by birds. By 2018, the tree was 30 feet tall and was healthier and more productive than all the other fruit trees I have planted. Once you have determined what type of fruits to grow, the next thing to determine is what varieties of each fruit to grow. While varieties are often chosen for the flavor of the fruit, there are even more important reasons for choosing the right variety. Variety choice can have a huge impact on your fruit growing success. For example, fruit trees that go into dormancy for the winter require a certain number of hours between 32 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit in order to break out of dormancy the next season. This is referred to as chill hours, and you can look at the number of chill hours your location typically experiences each winter with an online chill hour calculator. In Atlanta, we typically accumulate around 1,000 chill hours by the beginning of February. If I plant a fruit tree here that requires more than 1,000 chill hours, its ability to produce blooms may be impacted. Since blooms lead to fruit sets, which then lead to fruit, a tree which does not have its chill hour requirements met will have its fruit production negatively impacted. To prevent these issues, if your location has low chill hours, you will want to choose low chill hour varieties of the fruits you want to grow. Another area where the choice of variety can impact growing success is in terms of disease resistance. For example, I have a 20th century Asian pear tree, which is routinely afflicted with a bacterial disease, fire blight. Because of this, I rarely harvest any fruits from this tree. Fortunately, I also have a shingle Asian pear tree right next to it that never gets fire blight. It produces a large number of fruits each year. Fruit tree varieties can also differ in when their fruits ripen. Some varieties ripen early in the season, while others ripen mid or late season. One way to leverage this is to plant early, mid, and late season varieties of a fruit. Doing so prevents all the fruits from ripening simultaneously and creating an overwhelming amount of fruits all at once. It also effectively prolongs the harvest season and allows fruits to be enjoyed over many more weeks.
Zen, I'm not sure if we lost your audio. Hopefully that connection will get restored in just a second. Okay, so it looks like Zen had, there we go. Fantastic. Zen, I'm not sure if I can see the screen, but I don't hear you yet.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So it was missed when my connection got dropped.
Yeah, we just missed about the last minute of what you were saying. So if you could repeat that.
Okay. So I was just going over different types of varieties I was trying out for these fruit types. So was that part captured?
No, I don't think
Yeah,
so. Repeat that.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the portion we missed.
Okay, sure. Let me go back to that. Okay, so here's some examples of different varieties of fruits I'm growing. The persimmons, mulberries, and jujubes are examples of fruit varieties that I'm trying out for size. Fig varieties are being compared for disease resistance, and the Asian pears are being compared for taste, disease resistance, and the length of time that they can be stored. Once you have finalized the selection of fruit trees for your orchard, you'll need to find a place to source them from. Be sure to choose a reputable vendor. There's nothing worth spending years growing something only to find out it's not what you had intended to grow. For example, when I started my first orchard, I wanted to grow non-astringent Asian persimmons. I found them in the garden center local home improvement store. To the right are the labels I kept from these trees. I waited 5 years for the trees to fruit, only to get the worst Asian persimmons I've ever tasted. Those fruits are lower left. Not only were the fruits tiny, but they were also astringent even when they were fully soft. The following year, while researching native fruits that grew in my region, I learned about American persimmons. Got the
Looks
large.
like he's dropping out again. You dropped out for like 20 seconds there.
Okay. What was the last thing that you were able to hear?
You were talking about when you learned about the American persimmon.
Okay, perfect. All right. So after learning about the American persimmon, it was then that I finally realized that I had been sold American persimmon trees that were mislabeled as Asian persimmon trees. I promptly planted an Asian persimmon tree from another source that year, and in the same year, got large, delicious fruits that I was expecting. Those fruits are shown in the lower right. The difference between those and the ones on the left demonstrate how important it is to be able to trust that the fruit trees you purchase are the variety should be. When purchasing fruit trees, you have the option of trading less patience for less money in your wallet. Many nurseries offer more mature trees at significantly higher prices. These trees will fruit earlier since they're closer to fruiting age. So if you want fruit sooner, expect to pay extra for your impatience. Where you source your fruit tree, make sure you fully understand what warranties are offered by the vendor. This is especially important when purchasing trees that are dormant, since you will not be able to judge their health at the time of purchase. Dormant fruit trees are best planted immediately after purchase. This way, once the weather warms up in the spring, they're able to come out of dormancy in their permanent location and not have to undergo the stress of transplanting. Trees that are not dormant are best planted when the weather conditions are mild. Planting in the early spring allows the fruit tree to get established at its new location before having to deal with the heat stress and pest pressure that comes with the summer season. For the same reason, late summer, early fall is also a good time to plant a fruit tree. The tree will have several months to get established at its new location before going to dormancy for the winter. When I started my first orchard, I planted each tree by hand. As the number of trees I want to plant have grown, I have transitioned to planning out my plantings and then renting equipment to dig out all the holes at one time. When I built a new orchard at Tiny Country Farm 2 years ago, I rented a skid steer with a 24-inch wide auger attachment. In less than 2 hours, I had 100 2 feet wide, 2 feet deep holes dug out despite the local hard Georgia clay. Once fruits begin to ripen in my orchards, the animals are just as excited as I am to taste the fruits. Birds tend to be attracted to the smaller, softer fruits such as cherries, mulberries, and figs. However, they're easily discouraged with the use of bird netting. I use bird netting on trees when there are a large number of fruits to protect. When dealing with younger fruit trees with few fruits, I prefer to bag the fruits in small organza bags rather than dealing with bird netting, which can be tedious to install. Different locations offer different critter problems. With Tiny Country Farm being a good distance from the city, I do have to worry about deer. Thus far, I have found electric fence to be a sufficient deterrent. An electric fence is easy to install and can be powered with a solar fence charger even if no power supply is available by the orchard. By far the worst critter problem I've had to deal with is with squirrels. So far, they've been a problem for almost every fruit I grow with the exception of pomegranate, persimmons, pawpaws, jujube, and mandarin orange. At my tiny urban orchard, they have shown that they can easily remove hundreds of Asian pears from the tree within just a couple of days. Thus far, the most effective method I've come up with to keep squirrels from taking fruits from a fruit tree is to keep them from climbing or jumping into the tree. Squirrels have a vertical leap that maxes out at about 4 feet. I determined this by incrementally raising a squirrel feeder over several days until they can no longer reach it by jumping from the ground. When fruits begin to ripen on a tree, I wrap the lower 4 feet of the tree's trunk with aluminum fashion. This keeps the squirrels from jumping or climbing into the tree as long as they don't have another tree or fence nearby that they can jump from. This setup is the only reason why I've been able to harvest ripe Asian pears from my orchard. In conclusion, when I started growing my own fruits 10 years ago, I dreamed of harvesting an abundance of delicious and healthy fruits throughout the year. While my journey began with a rocky start, I'm happy to say that with trial and error and further research, the journey is becoming a much more fruitful one. I hope the lessons learned that I share today will help your dream of a backyard orchard be more fruitful as well. I'm sure I have many more lessons ahead of me waiting to be learned. If you would like to learn alongside me, feel free to follow me on Instagram at My Tiny Urban Farm as I continue my adventures in fruit growing. That wraps up my portion of the presentation on backyard orchards for Homestead. I'll now turn it over back to Nick.
Thank you, Zen. That was very informative. I like your method of keeping the squirrels out. I want to take two questions on to Tonia. Emily's asking Zen, what's your level of concern with pesticides and herbicides in the leaves and the mulch that you get from the curbside?
I do have concerns about that. What I try to do is for the leaves, I try to source from neighborhoods which I feel would have much lower level of pesticides present. So typically, if I see neighborhoods where the lawns have signs showing that the lawns are treated, I'll stay away from those neighborhoods. I'm not as concerned about the trees since you're coming from tree companies, which are often removing very large established trees. So I don't really see any reason why those trees would have chemicals sprayed on them.
Perfect, awesome. One more question. Somebody says that I've had bad experiences in wood chip delivery. They are in a hurry to dump, make a messy spread of chips instead of a pile, and rut up the soil from heavy trucks. Have you actually had a good experience with getchipdrop.com?
So I actually have had pretty good experience. What I do is I have an area that I've designated for the dropping off of the wood chips. And if you go into chipdrop.com, when you set up your account, one of the things that you can do is actually upload a picture of exactly where you want the wood chips to be dropped. So one additional thing that I do to make sure that the wood chips end up where they're supposed to, especially since my area is large enough to accommodate probably 20 truckloads. Sometimes the trucks will come up and they'll just dump in a random place in that area. And in doing so, they're kind of eating up space, and the next load can't come in and be dumped in a compact manner. So what I've done to avoid that issue is I just purchased a small traffic cone, and I place that traffic cone exactly where I want the next drop to be done. And in chipdrop.com, you can actually provide instructions. So I have instructions there that says drive up the driveway, look for the cone, and drop the wood chips off there.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. Basically, if you give them really good instructions, they'll dump exactly where you need them. And of course, you know, there's different drivers. Everybody has their own way of doing it. So you kind of have to bear with them. Someone also commented that you can call up the tree service companies directly and work with the local people that are in your area. You get to know them, then you'll be likely to get some pretty good chip drops. Okay, I'm going to move on and introduce our next speaker, Tonia Lordy. Tonia is a longtime community educator and experienced horticulturist. She shares her skills as a part-time faculty member for the horticulture department at Clackamas Community College and is the owner of Fruitscapes, an edible landscape design and consulting company. Tonia first became interested in fruit production when she took a fruit and berry course in 2010 that would spark a deep dive into the wonderful world of fruit growing. She began working in the Home Orchard Society Arboretum as an intern that same year, and in 2012, she assumed the role of orchard manager. She has since dedicated over 8 years to the space, teaching the community about growing organic fruit at home. When HOS closed their doors in 2020, she spearheaded the formation of the Home Orchard Education Center and now serves as the Executive Director, Lead Educator, and Orchard Manager. Learn more at homeorchardeducationcenter.org. Tonia, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Morning, everybody. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Okay, so yeah, my name is Tonia Lordy. I'm the Executive Director of the Home Orchard Education Center, community orchard out in Portland, Oregon. Actually, we're in Oregon City, which is just slightly southwest of Portland, Oregon. So where it all started and how did we actually acquire this land? Home Orchard Society, we refer to it as HOS, was an educational nonprofit that was established in 1975, and their mission was to promote the science, culture, and pleasure of growing fruit at home via educational outreach and assistance. They also did some preservation of disappearing heirloom fruit varieties, perpetuating the history, culture, and heritage of Pacific Northwest's 19th and 20th century pioneer orchards. So in the mid-'80s, HOS began the search for land to build a demonstration orchard. And in 1986, Clackamas Community College agreed to lease a long-term lease of a 1.6-acre piece of land on their main campus in Oregon City. That land was once a parking lot for employees of the original Smucker's plant. Just a little tidbit of weird information that I have in my head. The Arboretum was open to HOS members. It was a member-based nonprofit like NAFEX is, and it was run entirely by volunteers. The original planting was a mix of species, including apple, European and Asian pear, fig, plum, pluot, peach, apricot, cherry, kiwi, mulberry, blueberry, strawberry, currants, gooseberries, grapes, amongst some other things. By the 90s, volunteerism started to dwindle, and the remaining volunteers simply could not keep up with maintaining the site. HOS hired their first paid arboretum manager in the mid-90s. In 2003, HOS hired a new manager who transitioned to an organic management program. Up until this point, any of the volunteers could do whatever they wanted in the orchard. So they each had sections of the orchard. Say Bob and Jane would take care of the blueberries, and Bill and Joe would take care of rows 1 through 5 of the orchard trees. They would harvest, prune, amend soil, fertilize, and spray whatever they wanted to on the ground. So after she transition to organic management program, she also started incorporating more unique edibles and beneficial plantings such as gummy berries, haskap, sea buckthorn, autumn olive, pawpaw, and comfrey. A lot of comfrey, and anybody that grows comfrey knows that once you put one in, you're going to have lots of it, unless you get the kind that doesn't spread. So by this time, there was a handful of workshops that were being offered. Fruit was harvested, sold, and distributed amongst the volunteers, and the site and the volunteer opportunities were then eventually opened up to the general public. You didn't have to be a member at that point. And so how did I end up here? And you heard a little bit about this in my intro. So in 2009, I was attending Clackamas Community College for a horticulture degree and fell in love when I took my first fruit and berry class with the then manager of the HOS Arboretum. I did an internship with HOS in 2010. In 2011, I was hired as a part-time gardener. I was also the sole harvester and distributor of the fruit. And in November, of 2012, I was hired as the manager and have been stewarding this space ever since. So how we've changed over the years, I know you probably saw the picture of the shed in the first or the second slide. This is the picture of the shed in 2016 with 2 additions being put on it, plus a 8x10 walk-in cooler is in that middle section there. So a few years prior to my involvement with HOS, the manager decided to trial a no-spray approach to the orchard. And that was the year that I harvested 8,000 pounds of fruit. 80% of it was unmarketable. So in 2013, after I took over stewardship of the orchard, I implemented a minimal organic spray program. So currently we are harvesting about 11,000 pounds of fruit and seeing about 35 to 40% damage. And that's really good. I don't expect our damage to get any less than that. And we just keep an eye on it and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to grow healthy fruit. In 2013, we clocked about 640 hours of volunteer labor and had about 5 regular volunteers. After a few years, I was desperate for more help in the orchard, so I started developing the Community Orchard Program, which was launched in 2016. Community involvement with the care of the Arboretum has grown ever since. This year, we have over 74 registered community orchard participants, and about 30 of them come out at least once a month. About 15 to 20 come out 2 or more times a month. And I have a couple of older gentlemen that come every single week and put in 3 hours. It's absolutely wonderful. So far this year, we have over 2,395 volunteer hours logged, and we still have a month and a half to go. In 2013, HOS taught about 4 workshops. There was winter pruning, bench grafting in the winter, summer budding, and then they had an orchard care seminar. And by the end of 2022, HOEC, the Home Orchard Education Center, will have taught over 46 separate workshops. Transitions. So when HOS decided to disband near the end of 2020, a group of dedicated Arboretum volunteers got together to form the new nonprofit to pick up the reins. That is how the Home Orchard Education Center was born. We came in with a fresh mission, which is to celebrate and explore horticultural education, provide equitable community access to healthy food, and support systems that promote intergenerational community connection. HOEC endeavors to honor those that built and cared for this space over the years by continuing to provide quality educational programming, preserving and sharing heirloom varieties, and showcasing unique fruit species. We also hope to grow and diversify our audience and serve our community not only as a site for learning how to grow fruit, but as a space for recreation, respite, and community building. So what we do that we are currently offering to the community, we have workshops, we have a community orchard program and other volunteer opportunities. We have plant and scion sales, and we have a community supported agriculture program, also known as a CSA, and then we host a couple of community events throughout the year. So this is me teaching winter pruning, looks like a volunteer winter pruning class. This is one of the workshops we offer. Most of our workshops are hands-on. So all of the trees in the orchard are pruned by students. There's a lot of bad examples of pruning, and then there's a few good examples of pruning. These are more workshops. The large picture on the left looks like a bench grafting workshop, another volunteer workshop. And then the top right-hand corner is one of my interns learning how to prune a fig tree. And that bottom right-hand corner, you can see the dusted foliage of those apple espaliers. That looks like it's a pest and disease class, and I'm probably talking about Surround, which is kaolin clay, which we use extensively in the Arboretum as a means to help control apple maggot and codling moth. It also provides an extra benefit, which is sun protection. And with our changing environment, we're seeing a lot more sun damage and heat stress on the trees, and that Surround helps a bit with that. The beekeepers with that beautiful ominous sky in the background. That is one of our older resident beekeepers teaching one of our volunteers and probably looking for a queen and seeing how healthy the hive is. The top smaller picture is me teaching some of the volunteers how to do summer bud grafting. And then the bottom picture is some of our volunteers and interns working on summer grape pruning. Service projects. This is a group of students that came out from Lewis and Clark, which is a college in the Portland metro area. And they used to send out 2 groups a year of like 30 to 40 students to come out and learn about service in the community and growing healthy organic fruits and vegetables. ever since COVID. They haven't been back since COVID, but they were a wonderful group. They got a lot of mulching done in the orchard. Most of them have never picked up a shovel before in their lives. So mulching was a really good task for them. And it was always a lot of fun to have them out. And we hope to have them back again one day. We put kids to work in the orchard. What makes a healthy child is picking up apples, windfall apples, with a nut wizard. If you've never seen a nut wizard before, that kid with the weird springy thing on the left, it's a nut wizard, and we use it to pick up windfall around the orchard. It's really fun for kids. They absolutely love it. You can see some volunteers doing some cardboard mulching and then some harvesting down in the bottom corner. This is one of our wonderful volunteers, Nadia, and she's sorting apples for our CSA program. We do harvesting, and then we sort and we grade our apples. And we also teach our community-supported agriculture program participants about being a little bit more accepting of fruit that has a little bit of damage on it. So if we're going to pass off a little bit of scab, we're going to pass off maybe a little bit of a codling moth sting. Just because it has a little bit of a blemish to it doesn't mean that it's bad fruit, and it's probably going to be the best apple that they've ever tasted. You see some harvesting going on, and then that lovely woman in the bottom right-hand corner, she's helping us out with some fruit thinning. As you can imagine, fruit thinning on a 1.6 acre orchard is a huge ordeal, and it takes us probably about 6 weeks to get most of our fruit thinning done, and we still never thin enough. So our plant sales and scion sales, this is a happy customer leaving our spring plant sale with a newly grafted baby apple tree. That funny woman with the photobomb kid in the background, that is our fall plant sale, and we did a harvest festival this year and actually grew some pumpkins on site, and we were giving those away with every purchase. See some ladies looking at some assorted edible plants, and then berries down at the bottom corner. And our wonderful volunteers greeting our plant sale people. And that's me and another volunteer over on the right, middle of winter, all bundled up, and we're collecting scions that we then share with other nonprofits and schools. We do a lot of sharing with the Agrarian Sharing Network. Some of you may have heard of them. And then we also sell our scions as a fundraiser. This is one of our CSA boxes, and you can see it looks probably a beauty plum, mixed blueberries in there. The earliest pear in our orchard, which we harvest out in Oregon, July 9th, Belle de Journeau, red astrakhan, Irish peach, and Vistabelle are all of our earliest apples. And wonderful black caps, currants, gooseberries. We have 2 different share sizes for our CSA. We have a family share and an individual share. And the family share gets about 8 to 9 pounds of fruit every week for 16 weeks. And the individual share gets between 3 to 5 pounds of fruit every week for 16 weeks. So this is one of fruit tastings that we had for our volunteers and our CSA members. Obviously, it's not as large as the old Home Orchard Society fruit tasting, but it's a demonstration of what we grow in the orchard. And we started doing the wassailing events when we started in 2021, and it's been a really fun event to have the whole family out. And you can see some of our volunteers and participants putting toast on the trees and making little tags and blessings for the trees. And we give them bags of popcorn to feed the birds and little cups of cider to toast all of their trees. And somebody decided that they wanted to bless that tiny little fig tree that's probably only about knee height. It probably needed a good blessing for the year to get it through winter. Cider pressing. We do multiple cider presses throughout the summer. Before COVID, we were opening that up to the public, but since COVID, it has been strictly our volunteers and our CSA members. We do hope to open that up again to the public in the future. We are pressing mostly windfall, and we're picking about 4,000 pounds of windfall off the ground every year. Our orchard is fully fenced, so we don't have any deer. I'm sure we have plenty of raccoons and all of those other animals, but we wash all the fruit and we send people packing with their unfiltered, unpasteurized cider. You're not legally allowed to sell unpasteurized cider in Oregon, so we give everybody a warning, but usually most people drink it fresh from the press. So what are we growing on 1.6 acres? We have apples, at least 150 different varieties, European pears, 40 varieties, 12 varieties of Asian pears, 10 variety of quince, mulberries. We have a couple of species varieties, 3 blacks and 2 white. 3 variety of cherries. We've taken out most of the cherries that were in the orchard simply because in our region, cherries do not perform very well. They are highly diseased. And so over the years since I've been in that orchard, I've taken out at least 15 cherry trees. We hope to put some back, but we want to make sure that we put some things in place before we reinstall stone fruit, such as healing the soil a little bit, and then building a structure so that we can cover them during the rainy season, because those are the 2 things that are detrimental to the health of stone fruit in our region is heavy clay soil and lots of rain. We have about 4 varieties of plum left, 10 fig varieties, 3 American persimmon, 6 Asian persimmon, 2 seedling pawpaws. I am incorporating some named varieties of pawpaw. We love growing pawpaw, again, just like the previous speaker talked about pest and disease resistant. That's a wonderful thing to grow in your orchard. 16 varieties of blueberries, 60 grape varieties. I have Cornelian cherries, 3 varieties, 3 variety of cap, 2 variety of goomyberry, and then the ribes family. We have red, white, and black currants, gooseberries, and jostaberries, 5 varieties of caneberries, aronia, medlar, sea buckthorn, and 4 variety of elderberry. And I'm sure I'm missing a few things on there. So here's some nice pictures of the orchard. We have that quince in the top left-hand corner, and of course the fuzzy kiwi, which we grow 1 fuzzy kiwi variety and 2 hardy kiwi varieties. The large picture, that plant that you see in the background, of all the plants we grow in the orchard, that is the one that I get the most questions on, surprisingly. That is Petasites japonica. It is edible. It's butterbur, also known as fuki or bog rhubarb. I've never eaten it, but it is really stunning in the summer, up until about August when things start drying out. It's a bog plant, and we do not give it the conditions that it wants, so it pretty much weeps as soon as any daytime temperatures reach over 80. So I usually end up chopping it down and chopping and dropping and just using it to build the soil in the area that it's living in. Grapes, currants, and those are some non-astringent Asian persimmons. Those little pawpaw babies up in the left-hand corner. We have a section in the orchard that's called the edible landscape section, and it's basically a demonstration of what people could do in their backyards. It's a small section of the orchard. Most of the orchard is planted out in a typical orchard row fashion. But in that edible landscape section, we have a lot of understory plants, kind of permaculture-esque, food forest-esque. There's some good examples of what you should do, and then there is some examples that we kind of inherited and things that you probably are not a good idea, such as bushes and shrubs underneath your fruit trees. It makes orchard sanitation and cleaning up at the end of the year very difficult when you're trying to pull out foliage and dropped leaves from underneath a shrub or in in a shrub. So herbaceous perennials is really what I like to put underneath fruit trees. If you do want to do an understory, you can see that bottom left-hand picture has some strawberry. And of course, we're not growing those strawberries for fruit. They're in the shade of the fruit trees. So we're just basically growing it for maybe a little bit of fruit and just as ground cover, basically. And then there's some onion and also some vetch. Vetch is a nitrogen fixer. In the background, you can see some carrot family stuff, which has that umbel flower type, which is very attractive to beneficial insects. We're utilizing many different avenues as our pest control measures. In the large picture on the right, you can see all of the hummingbird feeders and the clear plastic cups. Those are both to help control spotted wing Drosophila. That's our small fruit section. So that's where we have our raspberries, blackberries, most of our currants and gooseberries. But spotted wing Drosophila is huge pest in the Pacific Northwest and probably in North America in general. And it loves those soft, small fruits. And hummingbirds are meat eaters. So we put excessive hummingbird feeders in areas that we have susceptible fruits. Again, this goes back to understory in the edible landscape section. You see it looks like some garlic and some sage and some creeping thyme. And then you can see the picture of the beautiful blueberries. And then, of course, the goomy berries. Goomy berries are Eleagnus family. And so they're one of the nitrogen fixing plants that we grow in the orchard. And then here's some pictures of some more fruit. We have some astringent persimmon there, and that apple on the top right, that's early season apple. I think it's probably Duchess of Oldenburg. And then the bottom right, we have the sea berry or sea buckthorn. Pawpaws, which are really fun and interesting for people. And then the pictures on the right, that tree on the bottom, that's a firecracker crab that is a biennial bearer. And it does this beautiful show off thing. I'm the prettiest tree in the orchard. Every other year, the apples on the top are the apples, the firecracker crab apples. It's a red fleshed crab apple, very unique. And we love to see it in bloom. Those are some kiwi berries and medlar on the bottom right-hand corner. And that's probably an empire apple on the top right, which is wonderful apple to grow in the Pacific Northwest, completely pest and disease resistant and excellent flavor. Arbutus unido, the large picture, strawberry tree, strawberry bush, they are edible. I don't think I've convinced enough of my volunteers to harvest and take them home and experiment with the fruit. It's not offensive, but it's not necessarily very sweet or tasty. Apparently, there's some varieties out there that are a little bit better tasters. We're just growing a species variety. It's just a lovely specimen plant to have in the orchard. The smaller picture on the right, those are aronia berries, and that's another North American native, pest and disease resistant. Again, not the tastiest fruit, but I do have some volunteers who would harvest those and make a nice dry red wine out of them. But whatever you don't eat or throw in your smoothies, the birds will eat. So we don't only want to feed ourselves, we want to feed all of our beneficial birds and insects within our community. The bottom right-hand corner is a yellow golden cornelian cherry, which is absolutely wonderful. Cornelian cherries are best if they're harvested from the ground. That's when they are fully ripe. And these hotter summers that we're having in the Pacific Northwest are really improving the quality and the sweetness of the fruit. So what's our big dream? Lowering or eliminating our workshop fees. We currently do have a fee waiver program for those on a limited or fixed incomes, but that fee waiver program is not fully funded and requires grant money or public donations. So we fund ourselves primarily through our services at this point. Workshops and our fruit sales are our biggest income generators. And currently our workshops are $35 to $45. And for some people, we know that that's not doable. So we would love to be able to have enough funding to be able to lower our workshop fees or do more of a sliding scale fee and have a lower price for those that don't have the means to pay for a $45 workshop. And fruit, CSA is our biggest income generator, but the cost of our CSA is pretty much market price. It's not really accessible for people on a fixed income. And we would really love to be able to give all of our fruit away for free. Again, there is an option on our website for those that are willing to donate to that fund, to choose which fund you want to donate to. And we did receive a grant this year where we will be able to provide half of our CSA shares for free to those that are in need in our community. So that's a huge one for us. We're in year 2.5 of being a new baby nonprofit. So we're getting there, but it's a slow process. So there is a lot of challenges that we're facing. And everything that you see on this list, funding is associated with all of those. We have a very limited hours of operation. We're only open to the public on Tuesdays and Saturdays from 10 until 2 p.m. We're open to our volunteers for a few extra hours during the week, but right now that's all the organization can afford to pay. We have limited staff. I'm paid to be at the orchard for about 12 hours a week. And I have an assistant who's paid to be there for about 8 hours a week. And then we have somebody who runs our marketing and our social media site, and she's paid about 10 hours a week. So it's not a lot of time to really get a lot of stuff done in the orchard when we're teaching 46 workshops and packing 60 CSA shares. Our volunteers are wonderful, but most of them are not very highly skilled. And that's one of the reasons they come to us, is so that they can learn and acquire these skills. And the nature of nonprofits seems to be, especially educational nonprofits, people will come in, learn and glean whatever information that they can, and then they move on and utilize those skills somewhere else. We do have some retention of our volunteers. And we hope that as we're training our volunteers will then train new volunteers. But just that rollover of skilled volunteers is challenging to us. We have aging infrastructure. Our building, the shed that we have, while we do have the 2 new additions to that shed, the original shed was built in mid-80s. And so it is we have a shed floor that's paver, so that's kind of falling through. We need some new gutters. Our fence line, because our orchard is fenced. We are on the college campus. We do have a lot of break-ins, and so people have cut our fence. It happens at least 10 times a year. So we have a lot of patchwork fence line stuff. And so that's a little bit of a challenge to kind of keep up and maintain. The trees are also aging. So many of the trees are original from the mid-80s, and these are all on semi-dwarf and some of them dwarf rootstock. And those grafted trees don't last as long as those old standard farm trees that we see on the edges of farm fields that are 100 years old. These trees are about 35 to 45. You might be able to pull 50 years out of them, but with having such poor soil quality and an irregular management over the last 40 years, they've kind of struggled. Another thing that we're challenged with as far as the health of our trees is we're growing 150 different apple varieties. Some of them are pest and disease resistant. Some of them are not. And so we're growing stuff that may be vectoring diseases to healthier trees, right? So that's always a little bit of a challenge. And spraying those trees is still a little bit of a challenge because this tree blooms in bloom period A. That tree next to it blooms in bloom period D. And so they want to be sprayed at different times during the spring. And so we just do the best that we can with spraying at the most appropriate time, but it's good for some of the varieties and it's not good for some of the other varieties. Increased environmental stressors. And so I'm sure many of us that are growing fruit are seeing a lot more sun damage. In the Pacific Northwest, we're having colder winters and hotter summers, and some of the plants are just not handling that very well. Last year, we had a week of over 100-degree weather and 115 degrees, and it burnt 50% of our blueberry crop. So that's pretty stressful when you have already sold your blueberries to your CSA share members. Luckily, we educate them and they are aware that they're taking part of the risk in the farming endeavor. So we supply them with extra fruit, apples and pears, the things that did do well, and we kind of cheat them a little bit on stuff where we have crop failures. The soil at the site that we're at is absolutely horrible. One of the reasons that the college allowed us to lease this property in the 80s was because it's the worst soil on campus. We're the lowest point on campus. And remember, this used to be an old parking lot. So for who knows how many years, that soil was pretty compacted. And we do our best to improve soil quality. But we're very, again, limited with time and resources and how we can handle and build our soil and be a little bit better stewards to the soil. And that's all I have, and it's not letting me exit out of the screen. There we go.
Thank you so much, Tonia. That was awesome. Good information. We will take about 20 minutes now to answer some questions. So if you have any questions directed for Tonia or Zen, if you could specify which asking the question, that helps out. So here, a question for Zen, I'm assuming. How do you keep your mandarin oranges warm enough? What variety do you grow?
Okay, so the variety that I've tested so far is Owari Satsuma. So I mentioned that I have two different orchard sites. One is near downtown Atlanta. The other one is about an hour north of that. And it just so happens that these two sites fall into two different cold hardiness zones. So one is in 8A and one is in 7B. So it does allow me the opportunity to test plants in two different zones. So I actually have the Satsuma planted at both locations. Unfortunately, it did not survive in 7B. And in 8A, I have not offered it any protection and it has grown just fine. I typically don't like to, with the number of fruit trees I have, I typically don't like to deal with fruit trees that require additional work in terms of caring for them. But I'm willing to try the Satsuma once again in 7B, simply because the times that I would need to perform work on it to provide it with cold protection is at a time of the year when everything else is dormant and I'm not super busy.
Awesome. I'm also growing Owari Satsuma in my tropical greenhouse and it seems to do fine there. Another question for Zen.
One additional note to add. I do have plans eventually to visit. There's a nursery in South Carolina that specializes in cold hardy citrus. So I do have plans to travel out there and try some more varieties.
Awesome. One more question for you, Zen. Someone's asking, I'm in zone 5A and have noticed that all Asian persimmons are only hardy up to zone 6, 7. Do you know of any cold hardy Asian persimmons, or should we only plant American persimmon?
Okay, so in that regard, so I don't have much experience in that regard because it's out of my zone. But what I would recommend is that there's an orchard in Kentucky. The name of the orchard is England's Orchard, and they have a large selection of persimmons that they grow and they constantly have new varieties that they're trialing. One thing that they do have there is a large collection of hybrid persimmons. These are hybrids of the American and Asian persimmon varieties. They kind of give you the best of both worlds. So the issue with the American persimmon is typically with the fruit size. They're small. With the hybrids, you get the larger fruit size of the Asian persimmons, but they also have improved cold hardiness. So one of the other reasons I recommend contacting England's Orchard is that I think in the last decade or so, they've had a couple of very extreme winter events. So whatever they're able to sell you right now has already been battle tested for cold hardiness. If you go to their website, you'll actually see them list some of their experience with the varieties, with the hybrid varieties that they have for sale. I believe there's some hybrid varieties that are hardy all the way down to negative 16 degrees.
Yeah, the Nikita's Gift hybrid persimmon seems to do pretty well here for me in zone 8. So yeah, maybe if somebody is around Pacific Northwest, they can try that one.
And one other thing is, if you're not part of this group yet, there is a Facebook group called Persimmon World, and it's a very active group. The owner of England's Orchard is frequently on there, so you can post questions from there or just post questions in general to the entire group, and hopefully you'll find someone in your area that has that experience.
Hey, Nick, can I just interject for a second and just give a shout out? Cliff Island is a longtime NAFEX member, and he is active in some of those other Facebook groups, which is wonderful. But he has been a tremendous resource and at our conferences, in-person conferences in the past. So if anyone reaches out to him for information, just let him know that you're a NAFEX member as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. Okay, question for Tonia. How do you thin heavy fruit set efficiently?
Efficiently. Yeah, we just do it all by hand. And is there an efficient way to do it? No, it's a very slow process. But again, I have 30, 40 volunteers, which definitely helps out a lot. A lot of my volunteers, some of our trees are a little bit larger, so the tops of the trees always get missed. I've thought to myself a few times, like, when the trees are on bloom, I wonder what would happen if I took a blower out there and tried to blow off some of the blooms. I haven't tested it out. We don't own a blower, but that's something that I've been thinking about. It's a long process. And is there an easier way to do it? There's sprays you can use, but those sprays, none of us really want to incorporate more sprays into our gardens. But yeah. Challenge.
Yeah, very true. Okay, here's another question. I guess this could be for the both of you. Do you do companion planting? And do you use geese or ducks to optimize harvest? Yes, let's have Zen answer this one first.
So currently, I don't do companion planting. One of the reasons is just in terms of the number of trees I have for ease of maintenance. I currently don't do that. The other reason is I simultaneously use the space in my orchard to grow my to grow some annual fruits. So things like watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe, things that need a lot of space to run. I like to plant those in the orchard. So I'm currently using the space for that. I don't use geese. I do have chickens that I'm currently hoping to use in conjunction with the orchard. Some of the insect pests tend to overwinter in the soil, and I'm hoping that by moving the chicken coop around the orchard, that will help to decrease some of that population.
Awesome. And Tonia, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so yeah, we do a little bit of companion planting. You saw the vetch, which is a nitrogen fixer. We also seed with a little bit of clover. We have the Eleagnus families, which are also nitrogen fixers. We grow a lot of onion and chives and leeks and garlic in the understory, which are sulfuric vegetables. And what's the thing we spray on fruit trees when they're hit hard with fungal pathogens is sulfur. So adding a little bit of that into the environment in the biodynamic world is supposed to be a really good thing. We could also utilize the greens from those plants and make incorporate them into compost teas, which might help to help the plants withstand fungal infections a little bit better. Have we done any of that yet? No, to be quite honest, simply because of timing. We just do not have the time to do that with where we're at this point.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question, I guess this is for Tonia. Any hints on how to get sufficient volunteers? This seems to be the biggest sticking point for nonprofits, yet somehow you seem to have managed very well.
Well, we offer our volunteers quite a few benefits. Definitely getting a share of the fruit is something that keeps them coming back. We also offer them free workshops. We have special workshops solely for our volunteers. We're super, super nice to them. And we keep them engaged. We try and teach them and teach them and teach them. And we don't, our volunteer program is pretty loose. So we don't require people to stay for 4 hours or sign up to volunteer for specific days. We allow people to come and they're on their time frame. So sometimes they come for 30 minutes, sometimes they come for 3 hours. And we're constantly engaging with them. So our communications person sends out newsletters to our volunteers twice a month. And we're just provide a space for them to come and relax and enjoy meeting other people who are like-minded. And yeah. Give them something in return. They're doing us a huge, huge service. And so we're serving each other.
Awesome. Okay, I don't know who this one is for. Someone's asking, do you plant strawberries under your peach trees to host strawberry leaf roller, which has a parasitic wasp that also attacks oriental fruit moth to help control it? Can also plant sunflowers to host the same wasp. Oh, it shows that Leslie wants to answer this one.
No, I don't need to. Don't need to answer. Dan Lefevre, one of our members, has some really good comments here that you might share, Nick. Or I can.
Oh, okay.
I can. So either way, why don't you go ahead?
Was that just a comment?
I think it's a good point to share. It was asking a question whether I use strawberries, awesome. But if not, it's a great point, and he has 2 more.
Okay, here's another one. Supplying more cobalt to trees at ripening time. Oh, it just jumped on me. Will reduce ethylene and abscisic acid. Preventing drop. All imparts heat tolerance on any plant. And then use protect, not insect netting for birds. SWD, and some sunlight deflection on blueberries can be draped directly on top of bushes. A question for Tonia. What spacing do you use for apples and on what rootstock?
To be quite honest, I have not installed any fruit trees in that orchard. I inherited a fully planted out site. So over the last 12 years that I've been there, apples and pears really haven't gone in. And so the trees that are already there are on different rootstocks. There's OT111, M7, Bud 9, M27, and depending on the rootstock, obviously, and they're all intermixed. So depending on the rootstock is going to determine what your spacing is for your trees. Most of them are probably, I would imagine, about 8-foot distance, so from center. And then there's some rows that they have much larger trees. So they're probably at a 12-foot spacing, but prior managers have also gone in there and between large trees tucked in tiny trees, which probably wasn't the best idea. They might have put an M27 in the middle of two M111s. And so the poor tiny trees are still very tiny and don't give us very much fruit. Some of them have been taken out since I've taken over care of the arboretum. But yeah, it's all going to depend on the rootstock, and we're so intermixed with our different rootstocks that they're all different spaces.
Thank you. Tonia, do you do lasagna composting or huge K culture? I'm guessing that's hugelkultur to improve soil.
Yeah. So I started installing hugelkultur mounds probably about 7 years ago, and we're still building hugelkultur mounds. We're not using so much woody material, and we're not digging down all the time. A lot of times we're using our herbaceous perennial clippings and non-fruit wood to build on top of our current soil. And then, adding in some sand and some soil and some nitrogen and neem cakes, manures, wood chips, and then we're covering them and letting them heal out or cook out for a couple of years with the intention of planting in them in the future. As far as lasagna mulching, we do a lot of cardboard mulching, a little bit of lasagna mulching. The whole orchard, all of the tree rows in the last 12 years have been cardboard mulched at least 4 times. And we even did some burlap one year. Do not use burlap to build your beds. It's really challenging when the weeds start to grow up through it, and then you can't pull weeds because the root system is below the fibers. Cardboard is definitely the way to go, but orchard grass eats cardboard, and so it seems like we need to be able to do it every other year, or at least have the wood chips available so that once we put down that 3 to 4 layers of cardboard and then 6 inches of wood chips, we just haven't been able to keep up with putting an additional 2 to 3 layers on every year. So the grass just keeps on eating it up, and we're still string trimming most of our rows.
Awesome. Yeah, that answers a previous question where somebody was asking how to keep the cardboard from blowing around in the wind, and you just layer the chips on top of that. Someone is asking, please detail how you are measuring progress in improvement of your soil. Tonia, thanks.
How we would love to be able to have the time to sort of do that kind of scientific work where we're measuring the health of our trees and the health of our soil. We're just not able to do that. I mean, 12 hours a week is all I get, and much of that is taken up by other activities. So basically what we're looking for is mycelia. I'm looking for a lot of mycelia anywhere that we do have remaining wood chips. It's usually in the edible landscape section. We try and keep that the most wood chipped area, if you will. So are we starting to see mycelial growth? That kind of tells me that we're doing a good job with building our soil. There's some areas in the orchard during the summer when we're in our dry spells in the Pacific Northwest. We have very dry summers, and areas of our orchard, the ground starts to crack. So I know that that's an area that we need to work on. So those are things that I'm looking at. And obviously the health of the trees, simply areas where our soil is a little bit less compacted and a little bit better, our trees are producing better, the fruit is a little bit larger. In areas where the soil is compacted and not as healthy, we notice a huge difference in the quality of the fruit. But as for measuring that, we really just don't have the time at this point.
Awesome. Yeah, mushrooms is really a good indicator of good soil. All right. Someone's asking Zen. You mentioned spacing recommendations are too far apart. How close do you put persimmons or pawpaws to each other?
Right. So I went back and looked at that plant tag from the persimmons that I gotten initially, and it recommends a spacing of 20 feet. And I would say that probably the thing that it would depend on first and foremost is whether you're talking about American or Asian persimmons. American persimmons have a much larger growth profile. Asian persimmons are much more compact. So in terms of Asian persimmons, I would say most of my spacing is about 15 feet, and that seems so far to be more than enough. In regards to pawpaws, I also started those at 15 feet, but then I've made multiple trips out to Kentucky State University and visited their pawpaw orchard there. And I saw that what they have are rows that are spaced 15 feet apart to allow them to get tractors and so on through there. But within each row, they have their pawpaw trees 8 feet apart. So after seeing that, I'm experimenting with some closer plantings at 7.5 feet. So essentially splitting my 15-foot spacing in half.
Thank you. We are running short on time. I'll ask one last question. Tonia, what is your favorite Asian pear?
It depends on the season, because every year, every variety tastes a little bit different. I like the thin skin yellow varieties as far as nice, crispy, juicy, refreshing summer Asian pears. Siguko is probably one of my favorites. Yakumo would be another one of my favorites, but the super flavorful ones that are the russeted varieties, Chojuru is my favorite russet variety.
Awesome. Thank you, Tonia. And we're going to bring this to a close. On behalf of NAFEX, I'd like to thank our speakers, Zen and Tonia, for making this a great session. Once again, the recording of this session will be made available on nafex.org webpage in 1 to 2 days and posted in about a year on our NAFEX TV YouTube channel. There may be other downloadable content on our webpage for conference attendees as well. Don't miss the other sessions in our 2022 virtual conference, including the one more session today that follows this one about the dirt on building healthy soil. And please stay connected on social media. You'll find all those links on our nafex.org homepage. And thank you again for joining us. Leslie, have I missed anything?
Nope, that was absolutely perfect, Nick. Thank you. And thank you so much, Tonia. Thank you so much, Zen. It was really excellent. And while you were talking, I was looking up that wood chip site and that sun tracker site and making lots of notes. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.